Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Walisha Wilson, and I'm the founder of New Life Second Chance Outreach, a nonprofit whose mission is to end mass incarceration by equipping, empowering, and restoring socially, economically, and civically disadvantaged Georgians impacted by an arrest, conviction, or incarceration. As a member of and on behalf of the Justice Reform Partnership, and in collaboration with tonight's guest, Restore Georgia, I would like to welcome you to our Talk Justice Tuesday Summer Series session, Reentry, Redemption, and Restoration, the challenges of reentry for people on the registry. This webinar is a part of the Talk Justice Tuesday series that is a collaborative effort of the Justice Reform Partnership, a coalition that has grown from just 5 organizations to over 90 organizations and individuals working to advance meaningful criminal and juvenile justice reforms across Georgia through advocacy, education, and policy change that aims to support and amplify the voices of justice impacted individuals and drive policy change. The JRP brings together grassroots organizations, community organizers, advocates, directly impacted individuals, and policy experts, all committed to building a more just and equitable system for our state. Talk Justice Tuesday is our annual series focused on legislative and policy changes at the Georgia State Capitol that directly affect communities impacted by the criminal legal system. Talk Justice Tuesday of each month are on the second Tuesday of each month and are designed to break down complex policy issues for the public, amplify the voices of directly impacted communities, and identify actionable strategies for advocacy. During tonight's session, in partnership with Restore Georgia, which is a Georgia nonprofit that advocates for Georgians impacted by Georgia's sex offense laws, we will have a conversation to hear about the challenges of a successful reentry, of people forced to register, and how these barriers also affect their children and families, the forgotten ones that Georgia's archaic and punitive registry laws leave out of the question. Before we proceed, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. So there's a chat and there's also a Q&A box. If you put them in the chat, when we get to the Q&A part, we'll make sure we get to your question that you put in the chat. If you're like me and you tend to forget your question and don't want to forget it, go ahead and drop it in the chat or use the Q&A tool so that during the time, if it's something that one of us can go ahead and answer, we will go ahead and answer it in the Q&A box. But if it's not something that we have not been able to answer through the Q&A box, we will answer at the end of the program during Q&A time. We also hope you'll join us for next month's Talk Justice Tuesday session, which will be on August 12th, as the JRP Coalition will partner with Change in Motion and the Georgia chapter of All of Us or None, where they will have a conversation on the new currency of the prison industrial complex, the Black man, and how we can work together as a community to disrupt systemic barriers to a successful reentry, and how we can drive change to stop the profiting of poor bodies by ending Georgia's current slavery law. For more information on future JRP events, see the chat for JRP's website and ways to stay connected. We'll also be sharing tonight's presentation materials and resources with you all from Restore Georgia sometime by Friday, and the recording will be uploaded later on JRP's YouTube page. There will be a presentation at some point, and we will also be emailing that to you as well in a PDF format. Now, to get us started, I'm pleased to introduce to you two of Restore Georgia's board members, Brandon Bowman and Pete Privateer, who work tirelessly to advocate for those the organization serves. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we get into the panel discussion, I want to give a reminder that this is a humanizing space, meaning we at JRP prioritize the use of language that centers the humanity of people impacted by a criminal conviction or other life experiences by using the word person-centered language, such as a person forced to register, a person on the registry, an incarcerated person, person on probation or parole, person with mental illness, etc. I know it may take some time to get used to the new language in this type of space, but we ask that you refrain from using terms such as felon, offender, inmate, prisoner, etc., as those terms define people by their charges or their circumstances and not by who we are today as people. Thank you. Now that we got that out of the way, we'll have a presentation from Pete. Don't worry about writing everything down or scrambling, as we will share the presentation with you by Friday. So right now we will welcome Pete Privateer, who will share his screen and go over his presentation. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Alicia. Let me go ahead and share my screen uh, and we'll get started. Uh, um, yeah, tonight I'd like to talk about the extraordinary challenges that we face, those that are impacted by the Georgia's sex offense registry law. Most every state in the United States has got this law, but how it's implemented varies greatly from state to state. Not only are persons forced to register, which is the term we would use instead of the offensive terms that the state uses, uh, it's not just the persons forced to register that are impacted. It's all of their families, their children, their grandchildren, their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, friends, and all those others that are impacted by these draconian laws that do very little to impact the safety of the citizens of Georgia. Um, Currently, there are about 25,000 PFRs on the registry in Georgia. That does not count those that are still incarcerated. Those are just the people that have been released that are either under supervision or have served all of their supervision time. The challenges, I'm going to break it down into six categories. Dealing with supervision, because after conviction or after release from prison, that's typically what most people have to deal with, probation or parole, or both. Housing issues, which is one of the biggest impacts. Employment, also a huge thing. Just simply complying with the law itself can be a problem. Travel is a nightmare. Family dynamics are impacted. And then of course, overall, the societal bias that comes with being a person forced to register. Um, let's talk about supervision. They call it special conditions of supervision, and they're imposed on almost all PFRs who are serving under parole or probation. That could be someone who was given straight probation as a sentence, or someone that's released after serving time in either jail or prison. Um, Newly released PFRs, and this is a new law that went into effect a year ago, July. So those that are being released today that have not been leveled, and I'll speak a little bit more about leveling in just a second, must wear and pay for an ankle monitor until such times they are evaluated by the Sex Offender Risk Review Board. That's the board that classifies PFRs. Keep in mind that currently 2/3 of the PFRs out there, that 25,000, have not yet been leveled. So this imposes a pretty big burden, even on low risk offenders. Um, the other thing that happens is that PFRs may have their internet or social media access. It could be blocked. A lot of people are not allowed to have access to the internet at all. Some are blocked from accessing social media or certain types of social media. So, for example, they may be blocked from accessing Facebook, but allowed to access LinkedIn. These things are typically determined by the supervising officer. There isn't a law per se that governs that. in any event, you can expect to have your internet access monitored, and doing something like accessing legal porn, again, use your own, it's the definition of porn is whatever the supervising officer says is porn. That would result in a very serious probation violation and could be subject to revocation. Um, Almost everyone getting on supervision initially has to undergo what the state calls treatment programs. You have to pay for those treatment programs, and those can be 40, 50, $60 a week. And you will be in these treatment programs from 1 year up to 4 years, and there are individuals even that are on these treatment programs for longer than that. The treatment program is really not treatment in the sense that you would expect, but is really more of a way for the state to supervise the PFR using the treatment providers. Um, Also, it's interesting to note that most of the people on the Sex Offender Risk Review Board are treatment providers, so they have a financial incentive for keeping people into the program. Also included with the treatment is biannual polygraph examinations, usually for 2 years. It could be up to 4 years, and depending upon how you do on the polygraphs, could be even longer than that. Failing a polygraph, while technically can't lead to a revocation, there are ways that they do that. For example, they'll kick you out of the treatment program for failing the polygraph, and then you could be revoked for not being in a treatment program. So polygraph exams are quite an issue for many people. A lot of times curfews are enforced where they may not be enforced on other people charged with on probation and parole. They often get enforced. Certain counties enforce them quite rigorously. For example, Hall County enforces a 6 p.m. Curfew if you're not at work. Travel usually has to be approved if you're leaving the state. And this is a one that really gets me, and that is personal associations. If you want to date someone, that usually has to be approved by the supervising officer, and they will contact or can contact the person you're dating. So that is quite onerous. Let's talk about one of the biggest issues that PFRs face, and that is where to live. The Georgia law says that you cannot live within 1,000 feet of schools, churches, child care facilities, parks, public pools, places where children gather, which is very subjective. And sometimes that can include bus stops, although that usually is not enforced. But the law is still on the books. If they decide they want to enforce it, they certainly can. So this 1,000-foot restriction is from your property line to the property line of the school, for example, as the crow flies. So even if you had to walk on a sidewalk or drive in a road, it would be more than 1,000 feet on a straight line basis, property line to property line. So it creates quite a wide area, which means that virtually all apartments, boarding homes, extended stay hotels, regular hotels, homeless shelters are all non-compliant, making it very, very difficult to find a place to live for those that are on the reentry list looking to come out of prison. This impacts greatly the people that could be released from prison, but they can't because they don't have a place to parole out or go to probation to. So this keeps PFRs in prison usually much longer than other crimes that are out there. Not only is the housing restricted by this 1,000-foot rule, employment is also restricted by the very same rules using this very same criteria, property line to property line as the crow flies. Interestingly, there is one other thing that happens in employment, and that is if there are children, which they define as anyone under the age of 18, employed at that location, you can't work there. So that's one additional restriction that you have to be concerned about. Um, those returning citizens that when they are released, first thing they have to do is register in the county that they are residing in. Registration is required annually for those that are leveled 1 or 2, and then every 6 months for those that are sexually leveled as a sexually dangerous predator, sometimes called level 3, but the technical term is sexually dangerous predator. That's their terminology, not ours. Okay. That information you have to provide is any residences or places that you sleep. Unfortunately, some PFRs are homeless, so they're homeless where they're sleeping as they're homeless, or their encampments. Those also have to be registered, and they have to be registered much more often if you don't have an actual domicile. Motor vehicles you have access to, not just your vehicle, but any other vehicle that you can drive, like, for example, maybe your spouse's vehicle or your uh, son's or daughter's vehicle or parents' vehicle or something like that. Any schools you attend, where you work, telephone numbers, and anytime any of this information changes, it's not like you wait till the next time you're supposed to register. You have to go into the sheriff's office within 72 hours of that change. So if you, let's say you get a new vehicle, you have 72 hours to go in and register that vehicle. The only exception to this is a change of address, which you have to actually do 72 hours prior to moving into the new registry. Failure to comply with this, for example, not registering a car or something, doesn't have to, depends on the supervising officer, but could result in a failure to register felony, which is punishable by anywhere from 1 to 10 years. So they're not playing here. They're pretty serious about this. So it's something that you want to pay very, very strict and close attention to. Travel, recreation is also an area that returning citizens, have to keep an eye out for returning citizens who are PFRs. Interstate travel, if you want to travel to another state, it's a whole patchwork of rules. For example, some states have a 24-hour rule saying if you're in the state for 24 hours, you need to register. Other states, it might be you have to be in the state 2 weeks before you have to register. There are resources. The NARSOL website, which I think we've dropped the link to, has a state wiki site. There's other sites that attempt to provide that information. But our suggestion is that you call ahead, talk to the sex offender registry unit in the county in which you intend to visit, and check with them and make sure that you're in compliance. Because once you have to register in another state, you can't get off the registry, and you're also subject to that state's restrictions. So, for example, if you want to travel down to Florida and stay in a hotel that has a pool, well, good luck there. Also, failure to comply with local registration laws could also be a failure to register felony in that state. Another thing that people are usually not aware of is that most cruise lines and theme parks, independent of what state they're in, will ban PFRs. So no luck going to Disneyland. Federal, state, local parks are also off limits, but it's not clear sometimes what constitutes a park. Is a national recreation area a park? Who knows? And then international travel is been highly modified under something called International Megan's Law that was passed a few years back. Your passports are marked near your photograph with this wording that this person has committed a sexual crime against a child, and that's going to be on the passport, whether or not you are on any sex offender registry. So some people will say, well, I'm not on the registry. My crime occurred before such and such a date. Doesn't matter. If you committed what they consider a list of crimes, sexual crimes against a child, that wording can be put on your passport. In order to travel internationally, you have to notify the sheriff office 21 days. There's a whole lot of rigmarole around that. And then a lot of places are just basically off limits to you. For example, Canada, although Canada restricts any felon, the United Kingdom, most of the Caribbean, South America, Middle East, Asia, and that they can be restricted even if you are not on a registry and manage to get off of the registry. So it's quite confusing and can be difficult just to do travel. Um, Family dynamics are one of the major impacts that PFRs, returning citizens who are PFRs, face. A lot of times the PFR may not be able to live with their children or are minors in the household that are under 18. Some PFRs may be restricted from dating someone who has children under the age of 18. Some PFRs may not have contact with their children or grandchildren or other family members without an approved supervision. I, for example, had to get my family members approved. I had to go to a class so that I could be around my grandchildren. Most PFRs cannot attend their children's school functions, extracurricular activities, or sporting events. I'd love to go to my grandchildren's soccer games, but alas, I cannot do that, even though I'm no longer under supervision. Those living with PFRs, so spouses or mothers or adult children, and so on, their address is on the sex offense registry too. So they could be ostracized or subjected to violence and harassment. So all of this makes it difficult living situations and family situations for PFRs. And then there's the societal bias, which a lot of people think of first when it comes to registries, but public shaming by making your mugshot, your crime, any personal information publicly available on the web. And there are other media sites which love to pick this up and then put their own names on there, such as they might, instead of just saying he's a PFR, they might say use more demeaning terms, terms that are not true. Very, very few people on the registry are actually predators. It's a tiny, tiny percent, but some of these sites like to make those claims, which we know that PFRs are often subject to threats or harassment, vandalism of the residents, and unfortunately, in some cases, violence. In some counties in the state of Georgia, it has happened where the sheriff will want to put a sign in your yard or on your door. This has been challenged by NARSOL, and so far we've won the legal challenges, but they try every year to find a way around the legal challenges. And next Halloween, I wouldn't be surprised if some county didn't figure out a way to circumvent the court rulings. And then there are a lot of misconceptions that are out there that are not supported by any evidence or empirical data or any real scientific research. For example, every PFR is a predator. Yes, there are some people out there that are potentially dangerous or could potentially be dangerous, but they're very, very tiny, tiny percentage, 1 or 2% at the most. Strangers pose the greatest threat. Actually, that's not true. Most sexually oriented crimes are committed by somebody that the victim knew, somebody in their life. That's 90+% of all the sexually oriented crimes that are out there in the United States. So it's stranger danger. Yes, it does occur, but again, it's extremely rare. Um, there's also the concept that PFR recidivism is frighteningly high. That was terminology used in the Supreme Court to justify maintaining registries nationwide. The truth is that that sexually related crimes have the lowest recidivism rate, 3-year recidivism rate, with the exception of murder. So that completely the opposite of what most people in criminal justice will try to tell you. Uh, the PFRs can't control the urges. It can't be rehabilitated or cured. Simply not true. Most of the people on the registry is that it was a one-time thing, and they are in no way, shape, or form a threat to society. Most PFRs will reoffend. It's just a matter of time. Absolutely not. Again, lowest recidivism of any crime with the exception of murder. And if you want to see the actual data on this, again, refer you to the narsol.org for actual unbiased research and data. Please check it out. We don't have time to go into all of the data here on this call. On a positive note, sort of, the Georgia Sex Offender Risk Review Board, or SORB, in the state of Georgia, we're one of the few states that actually classifies PFRs according to their a risk assessment. They assess the person's risk to reoffend rather than basing their classification on the crime that they committed. Georgia has 3 levels: low level risk, which is level 1, moderate risk, which is level 2, and high risk, which is they don't call level 3, they call it sexually dangerous predator. Again, their terminology, not ours, not mine, but you should be aware, because calling it level 3, you're not going to find anybody out there in law enforcement that uses that terminology. The state also, if you're classified, for example, level 2, given that classification, you can appeal. Or if you're classified a SDP, that can be appealed and potentially changed. Georgia also is one of the few states that has a way for PFRs to get off of the registry. However, you have to be a level 1, and you have to complete the entire sentence, including all supervision, paid all your fines, and that sort of thing. And then it's up to a judge. You have to go in front of a judge. And today, most people, some say you can do this without a lawyer, but anecdotally, we believe that most of the time you will need a lawyer in order to do this. However, just getting off the registry does not guarantee restoration of all your rights. In other words, it's not a panacea. Again, you're going to have a problem with domestic and international travel. For example, if you travel to Florida, even if you were to get off the registry, Florida doesn't base whether you need to register in Florida based on whether you're registered in another state. They base it based on the crime you committed. So if you committed a crime which the state of Florida would require you being on the registry, you are required to register in Florida. So got to pay attention to that and know the laws of the states that you're traveling to, even when you're off the registry. And then some locations and vendors, like I mentioned, cruise lines and so on, the bans are based on crime committed, not whether or not you're on the registry. And also, I mentioned earlier that travel to foreign countries is also based on the crime that was committed rather than on the fact you're on the registry or not. So what can you do? Well, I think as Wylisha said earlier, we need to see PFRs as people, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, PFRs, we are people. We're not monsters or boogeyman. We are people just like everyone else. Talk to your legislatures, advocate for evidence-based laws that don't waste their time monitoring those that are of little or no threat to society. Leave the resources to monitor those that are the most threat to society. Don't just paint everybody with the same brush. And you need to advocate with your legislators, because I guarantee you next year, somebody's going to come up with a new law that they think is just the cat's meow in terms of taking care of this PFR problem, and we'll have to get out and rally against, educate others, your friends, family, and others against societal bias and discrimination using facts, not feelings. Uh, and then also there are organizations out there such as Restore Georgia and the National Association for Rational Sex Offense Laws, which is NARSOL. We've dropped those links in the site. So, and if you have any questions about this presentation or any comments or want to get involved, again, you can contact either me or info at Restore Georgia, and we'll be happy to work with you on that. So having said that, I'm gonna uh, call it in. Turn it back over to Alicia.
Well, thank you, Pete. That was a very, very, very informative presentation. I know just during my time, even though I lead New Life Second Chance as my time as a board member on Restore Georgia, I have learned so much from you all and the work that you do in educating me myself. And I think it does start with education. I think I really do believe personally that laws are made for criminals and dangerous people, and but I don't think laws are being made for humans and fathers and doctors and lawyers. And I think once we change language and how we're seeing people and understand the circumstances of what happens, and I think the world would be much better. I posted on my Facebook earlier something I had saw what somebody said: when you put red ants and black ants in a jar together, they don't fight or become combatant. But when you shake them up, they start fighting. So the question is not about us being different. The question we should be asking ourselves is who's actually shaking the jar to keep us at odds and stuff. So I thought that was really, really great. And you had a very, very detailed presentation. So if you want to stop sharing, Pete, um,
Yeah.
and that way we will go ahead on and do the round robin. And we're going to have Pete and Brandon. So we're going to get Pete to stop sharing.
I'm having a problem figuring that out. It's not wanting me to go to that screen. I'm sorry.
Oh, down at the bottom where it says share the green arrow, you should say something, say stop.
Here it is. Let's see. Oh, there it is. I got it.
There
Sorry
we
about
go.
that.
There we go. So I guess what do you do? I don't know what this means when you say spotlight, but can you spotlight more than one person? Let's see if we can spotlight more than one person. Oh, there we go. So we will spotlight three of us. Okay. So we will go ahead now and go around our round robin. And after this, any questions that you have basically for Pete's presentation, feel free to drop it in the chat. I know Joey's been dropping some information and other folks have been dropping stuff in the chat. So if you have any questions on that, drop them in the chat. So right now we're going to start our questions. And I think my first question is going to Brandon. I know Pete threw out some stats and I dropped some in the chat. And for those who may not have seen it, which is what I learned last year when I attended the NARSOL conference, which blew me away as a child who has been sexually assaulted as a child and as an adult. It really blew me away because all of the information that I hear out is we need the registry because the registry keeps people safe. And as I thought about that, I'm like, the people who offended me were not even on the registry. And so it shocked me to know that of all of the crimes that happen in the United States, the ones with the lowest recidivism rate, meaning repeat rate, are those who have committed sex offenses. And then when I found out that like 83% of children, when they are assaulted, they are, it really does a lot of damage and harm when we say stranger danger because it's always putting the focus on people you don't know, but unbeknownst to my family, the folks who was doing their harm to me were people right there in the house. So that does a lot of damage when you're saying be aware of stranger danger, watch these people that's on the registry, because if the guy next door lives to me on the registry, I could care less as long as he's going to work doing what he does. And most people just want to go to work and mind their own business. And I think what it is sort of like a red herring while you're over here watching these folks that they're putting on the registry. The folks who are not are the ones who's really doing the damage. So I just want to throw out another fact that considering that over 90% of sexual assault victims knew their attacker, which literally obliterates the fear surrounding stranger danger, that 95% of sexual offenses are committed by people who are not on the registry, that less than 3.5% of people on the registry reoffend, as opposed to 67% of people who are convicted of other crimes, and the fact that there are zero studies from scientists or scholars that have proven that sex registries make communities safer. Brandon, why do you think society continues to treat people convicted of sex offenses as lepers and refuses to support folks on the registry in their reentry?
All right. Well, good evening, Alicia, and thank you for having me on this panel. My name is Brandon Bowman. I'm the current board chair here at Restore, Georgia. Let me answer your question. So that stigma is rooted in fear, not facts. We've been conditioned by the media and policy to equate registry status with danger, despite the overwhelming evidence that shows otherwise. So you said over 90% of the offenses involved someone the victim knows. That means there's not a lot of stranger danger.
Yeah.
Almost all the offenses are committed by people who weren't on the registry, because you said 95%, 90, the statistics say 95 to 90% of all sexual offenses are committed by people who were never on the registry.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the catch. Fear sells. Fear drives votes. These politicians will capitalize on the public anxiety, and society absorbs the messaging uncritically. So people convicted of sexual offenses have the lowest recidivism rates, but they become permanent symbols of danger even when they pose none. So until we shift that narrative that focus on evidence, redemption, human dignity, people on the registry are going to be treated as outcasts, regardless of who they are now.
Thank you so much. And Pete, I know you touched on it on your presentation about one of the biggest challenges is obtaining housing. So before and after their release, including ending and getting rid of living restrictions and fixing the registry to have only people who are a credible threat to society be on it. But what are some of your recommendations to support reentry efforts for registrants so that they can acquire housing? Um, I know that we talked about that, but just a few recommendations. I know you said to make sure that they're more available, but what are some recommendations that you could possibly um, suggest?
Well, certainly, those who are supporting PFRs, their family members, or just people in the community that are providing housing to other returning citizens need to think about or keep in mind PFRs when they're setting up these kinds of housing situations. So make sure that the housing that they're setting up is compliant with the law so that they could admit a PFR to their location. Sometimes that's not all that difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult. Just as a general rule of thumb, the more densely populated the area is, the more difficult it's going to be to find a location that is compliant. A lot of times you have to go to a less populated area, less densely packed areas, because the more densely packed, the more churches, the more schools, the more swimming pools and parks and playgrounds and that sort of thing. So that's one thing we can do. There are people out there that are providing housing today, or halfway houses, or transition housing, or things of that nature. And just maybe if they would keep in mind these onerous restrictions that PFRs have that are keeping them locked up in prison much longer. In fact, in some cases, past their max out dates. So it's that's one thing we can do. And also family members, keeping that in mind, being educated about what is and is not compliant, how to check addresses to make sure that that location is compliant. I know in my case, my wife, we thought we bought a house, we thought it was compliant. We were wrong. We poorly understood how the distances are measured. So by becoming educated, you can maybe eliminate those mistakes. And keep in mind that places like trailer parks, or single family residences are more likely than apartments or places like that. So and if people have the wherewithal to set up compliant housing, you would be doing a great service to those thousands of people that are still stuck in prison because they don't have a place to parole or probation out to.
Thank you so much. And I think that helped me segue to the next question, because that was something I was completely shocked about when it came to the process of buying a home. I think we have actually, while during my time there at Restore Georgia, we had an advocacy of somebody was it purchased a home, had been in that home 5, 10 years. This ain't talking about rent. I'm talking about you got a mortgage and a daycare or something moved next door, and you were told that you had to move. So Brandon, as we can you give us some clarification on that? I think what can happen to somebody that does find compliant housing, but they don't own it? And what if they buy a home and a few years later, a daycare sets up shop next door? What is that process? Do you have that process about it? Because me personally, I feel like when you're buying or you were somewhere first, you should have the dibs. That other person should be forced to leave. So can you give us a little bit more clarification on that when it comes to buying versus renting?
Well, being a homeowner, I understand this question because I bought the house while I was still on the registry here in Georgia, and therefore I was always concerned, hey, what if someone set up a daycare? But what I was told here in Gwinnett County, where I live at, that if since I purchased the home, I cannot be forced to sell or move. But in statute, it says if you bought the home prior to like July 1st, 2008, you're good. But in recent applications, I've been told that they won't force you if you're a homeowner. So
Okay.
if you're renting though, you could be forced to move like after your lease is over of that period. Like if I mean that's I've heard that's happened, you know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, Pete, in your presentation, you mentioned the issue of leveling. And I think you briefly mentioned that there is currently a backlog of people not being leveling. Why is why is the issue of people not being leveling even a problem? And why is leveling important? And what are some solutions to catching up those leveling cases? So I guess
Yeah,
I'll break it
that's
down. The first question: why is there been a backlog? Why is that a problem?
well, in order, level ones and level twos are treated very differently than level threes. For example, level three has to wear ankle monitor for life, have to register twice a year, and usually have much greater restrictions on their internet and social media access. Um, and of course, if you want to get off the registry, you have to be a level one, which means you'd have to somehow move down from a level three to a level two to a level one, or from a level two to a level one. So the leveling is pretty darn important. And of course, since they passed this new law that I mentioned, that if you are not level, they're going to treat you as the most dangerous, and therefore require an ankle monitor, which I don't know who here has worn an ankle monitor, but I have, and it is no fun. You will not be wearing your shorts very often. You'll be wearing long pants in the middle of summer, and charging that thing, sitting with your leg up on the charger, is no fun, and it costs a ton of money, which a lot of these people just don't have. So those are some of the reasons why the leveling is important. Why are they behind leveling? Well, it's a matter of priorities. This just isn't a big priority to the state of Georgia. And you know, you can. I saw somebody drop a link to the SOAR meetings in the chat. So feel free to go out there and check out the SOAR meetings yourself, and you'll find that usually they're leveling somewhere between 50, 100, maybe on a good day, 130 people a month. And when you have literally 2/3 of that 25,000 that haven't been leveled, you do the math. If they don't let any more people out of prison, PFRs out of prison, it'll take them 10 years to catch up on the backlog on the way they're going. But they don't have the resources. They will claim, and it's somewhat legitimate, that they don't have the resources to do the investigations into people in order to whittle that backlog down. And you know, it comes down to, like everything else in government, money. They just don't have the budget to hire people. I think it's good that they're actually looking at you and looking at information besides just your crime, or you know, the court, what was in court. That's great. They're looking at your behavior in prison. They're looking at your, what they call static 99. They look at other factors like, do you have support from family members and that sort of thing. So they're basing the risk on some valid things, some scientifically researched thing. I think it's good, but that requires human beings to do that work, and they just don't have the capacity. They have added a few. They've picked up their rate a little bit in over the last, 10, 12 months, but they're still way, way, way behind.
So it seems like they probably would need to hire some more people and get some more hands on to get that going. And I imagine it's important too, because like you said earlier, in order to even get off the registry, you have to be leveled first. Do you know if
Right.
they expedite you if you're put to the top of the line, if you're saying that you're requesting to be leveled due to being off the registry, or it's like, no, you got to get at the bottom of the line?
No, I mean, if you can go to court and essentially the law allows for someone to go to court and get an order. The judge can order SORB to level you, and then they have 90 days in which to actually level you. However, there is no teeth in the law. So if they were to take more than 90 days, there's no, I mean, it's no skin off their nose.
Okay.
Even though the law says they have 90 days, you know, they can do pretty much what they want. So there's no guarantee that you would be leveled within 90 days, but you can go to court and more or less force them to level you. But you got to get a lawyer. You got to get on a court docket, which in some counties is extremely difficult. I've been waiting over a year to get on the docket in Cobb County for my hearing to get off the registry. And I'm having a real difficult time getting a court date. So, but yes, the law does allow for you to go to court and force them to level you. It is
Okay.
in the law.
Okay, and I also see that someone dropped in the chat that you can also request to have your leveling expedited by going to SOAP's website. And again, all these information that's in the chat, we will make sure we get that to you. But the goal is by Friday, but hopefully we can get it out to you by tomorrow. So we have one more question for each of you. Brandon, what are some of the examples? I know when we talk about lifetime ankle monitoring for folks, that is very expensive. And I think it's sad to know that it's no different. They lock you up in prison, but then they tell you you have to literally pay the bill. You have to. Some of the money goes back to the police units and all this stuff. Literally, you're paying for your own incarceration. So when you're doing the ankle monitoring, you're having to pay for that. That gets very, very expensive. What are some other examples of expenses that must be paid by individuals on the registry after incarceration? Besides the ankle monitoring, what other expenses are
Yeah,
involved?
there's like things like you could be assessed a registration fee at your county office. The statute doesn't say how much it could be. All it says is any associated fees. Before 2020 it used to be a $250 fee, fee that they could assess on you as a person forced to register. But they took that out in 2020, and it's all it says now in the state statute is an associated fee. Doesn't doesn't tell you how much, doesn't tell you what it could be. I think it varies on the county. I've been I've been in the two counties I lived here in Georgia. I did not have I wasn't I think I might have paid $25 in Gwinnett County. That was it. It's been
Okay.
so also things you associated types of fees, your counseling, your therapy requirements. As Pete talked about earlier, we're talking 40, 50, $60 a week, depending how much per session. Then you
Okay.
might have those like quarterly reviews. That might be $60, $70 a quarter. Um,
Which
you're
seems very unreasonable considering folks on the registry have find it more challenging to even find a
exactly.
job. And then when you do find a job, because your name is out there, people come to your job and ring you off of a job. So it
Uh,
just, to me, it seems very counterproductive.
and well, was it polygraph? The polygraph fee is for you could be you could have a requirement to do polygraphs every 6 months. So that could be 280, $300 every polygraph. So and
That's
it
ridiculous.
just adds up. So unless you have strong family support, financial support, it is difficult. It is very difficult.
Okay.
I've seen like some treatment providers will help provide for like assistance, but it's rare. They don't go so far. Uh,
Okay.
so reentry is expensive, and it's not, and it's more expensive for those forced to register. So
Yes. Okay. Well, I wanted to ask Pete, I know when we talked about it earlier, I think one of the biggest shockers, I think when I came into this space of advocating for folks on the registry, even though I'm not on the registry, I get that question all the time. You don't have any skin in the game. Why does this matter to you? Because I have a problem with misinformation. I have a problem with just people separating folks. Oh, you serve Fed time, you serve state time, you got a violent charge. I believe that we're all people. I think we're all worthy of redemption and being able to get the second chances that we need. But I think what I found one of most of outstanding was that when I found out that there was a child as young as 8 years old who was autistic on the registry here in Georgia. And then I also found out that in the state of Georgia, people are being placed on the registry. uh I mean, yes, we know there are some people who've done awful things, but there are folks on the registry for peeing in the wrong place. There are people on the registry for, men, married couples, if they have sex too loud in earshot of their children and their children go to school and saying that, mom and dad was having sex too loud, the parents can be placed on the registry. I've heard just in the work that I do at New Life about someone being placed on the registry for kidnapping. And I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be snatching nobody. And they were like, we didn't snatch anybody. I literally was breaking up two people fighting. I put one person in a room to restrain them. And technically, that is considered kidnapping in the state of Georgia. Why they put kidnapping on the sex registry, I don't know. But
oh,
that is considered kidnapping.
well, Alicia, to clarify that the kidnapping, it only involves if the victim is a minor, and but not if you're the parent. So it all depends. It's all technical of what it terms of.
So if
Uh,
someone is applying that wrong or separately, what does someone do about that? Because I do know that for a fact that there are folks on the registry in Georgia who've contacted us at New Life, a couple from having sex too loud, or the issue of somebody fighting and being separated. Because they separated that person, they limited their whatever,
if the
their ability
application
to
of the
move.
registry is done wrong, we have attorney partners that
Okay.
we can direct them to say, hey, this is what the statute says. Here's an attorney we trust. You can say, hey,
Okay.
with this information, maybe we'll look into an appeal.
Okay.
That because I
And just
think,
even in that thought, the fact that you're snatching people, kidnapping has nothing to do with a sex charge. I mean, when people kidnap people, why are you even automatically the first thing going in your mind is that people are kidnapping people with the intent to
yeah.
do some type of sexual harm to it? So yeah, it's everything is just the laws are just really biased.
And at Restore Georgia, we are not lawyers, but we do have a lot of knowledge. And there's a lot of details in some of these cases we're not privy to. And
Mhm.
so we know good attorney partners that can help us guide you in the right direction, and help you get some of the questions answered. You know, um,
Okay.
so
And we've had some of our attorney partners come to our line. If Laura can get an opportunity to drop our YouTube page in the chat, well, Restore Georgia's YouTube page in the chat, where we have our statewide meetings. We usually have statewide meetings 2 or 3 times throughout the year. And we've had a couple of attorneys that come on and talk about their services, getting you off the registry and things like that. And I think we also had one of our statewide meetings that recently talked about getting off the early probation of termination, which has been a problem and a challenge for people because the new law that passed a couple of years ago, I don't know the number of it, but it is the law that says if you've been on probation for at least 3 years, you can request to be off your probation terminated early. And what we have been finding is that people on the registry, you are eligible, even on the registry, and that POs have been giving folks on the registry really hard time saying that, oh, you're on the registry, you don't qualify. That is a lie and it's a myth. You are eligible to have your probation terminated early, whether you're on the registry or not. Now, that has nothing to do with you getting off the registry. It may help down the road, but on the registry, you are able to, through SB 105, which is what the bill is. Thank you, Paige. You are also eligible to have your probation terminated. And that also leads into something that really does matter, your right to vote. When you're able to get your right to vote, and I think a lot of times people in elected positions, they forget that we vote. They forget that the same way they got in, the same way we can get them out. And I think one of the things that Pete mentioned about how we can help contact your legislators is to let them know that we have a collective voice and we're not going to continue to sit by idly by and allow you to continue to make laws that are not only targeting us, but are not helping us and are hurting us. So I think one of the questions I wanted to ask Pete before we close is, I know you brought it up, and I think it's something people a lot of times forget about. They always think about, the folks on the registry, folks on the registry, folks on the registry. But with Georgia being a state that will lock women up for trying to have reproductive care, will lock people up for trying to have abortions, we love the children so much. We tend to forget that folks on the registry have children that they have to take care of and families that they have to take care of. And I know you mentioned that. So when PFRs are actually denied housing or employment or get a job and are later fired when it's found out they're on the registry, just in just some plain words, how are families impacted by these regulations? People being on the registry isn't just affecting themselves. How are their families impacted? I imagine when a person loses their job, these same children that the state of Georgia claims to love so much are actually impacted. So just give us a little bit more about that.
I mean,
Well,
kids are getting bullied in school over it, because their parents will
mhm.
tell their kids, hey, don't hang out with that one child because their parent did such and such. We've heard stories of that. It's impacted kids' lives. It's torn families apart. It's been forcing families to move. And so the registry it doesn't just impact the person forced to register, it impacts everyone around them, their whole society, like their
Yeah.
whole, like their support system.
Okay. Well, thank
Yeah, I
you.
mean, well, Alicia, depriving children of their parents, or we know we know that is a huge impact on them as they grow up. And when a parent can't live with the children, or there's restrictions on how they even interact with or visit those children, we know this is detrimental to a child's development. So we know this in other parts of society, but we seem to be willing to ignore that if that person has a charge which is somehow related to the sexual boogeyman there. So we have to make sure that our legislatures understand that they're it's one thing if the crime was committed against one of those children. It's another thing when the crime was perhaps a contactless crime, which the vast majority of sexual offenses in Georgia are. There is no actual live victim. and yet they're prevented from parenting their child because of this. And so, we can't paint everybody with a brush. We have to with the same brush. We have to understand that having both parents is to the benefit of the child, and something that society should be seeking to foster.
Yes, thank you so much. And we're gonna get ready and close. I also through my own organization, New Life, we actually one of the biggest things we've been advocating on is about the faith community's role in reentry. And a few years ago, I found out that a lot of churches in Georgia do background checks. They do background checks on people who do visitor cards, and they're actually putting people out of churches, not only just because they have sex offenses, but because they've been to prison, period. I don't have any sex offenses, but I was put out of three churches when I got out of prison 14 years ago because I was told that because I had got out of prison, I made people feel uncomfortable. And so I just want folks on this call to know that the biases and the stigmas, not only just against people on who have a who are just as impacted, but particularly folks on the registry, is extending to places that supposedly this country is 80% composed of. And so I just want folks to be able to understand that you can't really, what they say, salt water and spring water can't sprout from the same fountain or whatever it is. You can't proclaim to be a person that loves and has principles about faith, compassion, mercy, and love, but at the same time, you're willing. We're just very contradictory. We believe in life before it's actually even born, but we have no problem with the death penalty. So we find when to bring them into this world, but we ain't got no problem with you taking them out. So these are the kind of things that I just want. I'm hoping that folks on this call got some information and really learn some things on here about the challenges to reentry for folks on the registry. And I appreciate you all and thank you all so very much. And before we get ready and go, I know Laura has some links to drop. I know Pete spoke about it in his presentation of how you can help, but we had some additional ways that you can also help with the work that Restore Georgia does. Nobody's paid. There's no compensation. The board members and then those who donate to the organization very generously supporting it. So there are a lot of ways that you can get involved, from donating to becoming a member to volunteering. Even if it had been you volunteering in this chat to drop chat links and being on the board, to be able to be a voice for the folks that Restore Georgia serves, and attending free and virtual fearless meetings. Restore Georgia hosts a virtual support group every third Thursday of the month. And it is for folks who are on the registry and families only. There's no POs, there's no COs, there's no law enforcement that's allowed in the room. It is just a safe and secure space to share resources. And oftentimes there are folks on that call who says, hey, I got a landlord who's got a couple of houses for rent, and he'll rent to folks on the registry. Or just to be able to connect and get resources. So if you can, please join us at the July 17th. And New Life Second Chance will also be there, and we will be giving away a $25 cash gift card to everybody who attends. Your name will be thrown in a pot, and we'll be giving out a cash gift card. Um, so we will also be sending the PDF. If you have it here, Pete, and you have it in PDF format, if you're able to drop it in the chat, feel free, but we're also going to send it out as well. And so right now we're going to go into our Q&A session. We have about 10 to 15 minutes. If you have any questions, we're going to open this up. If there were any questions, we would like for you to limit your question to 2 minutes. If you have a question that you may have dropped in the chat earlier, but at some point between the panel, or if other folks in the chat have already dropped your answer to it, please do not ask a question that has already been answered or it has been put in the chat. But if you have any questions, thank you, Pete, for dropping that. But if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we will take you off mute. I am going to go and see if I can find any question, the first question. I know a lot of comments have been going on in the chat, but I wanted to see the first question. Okay, that's fine. We'll make sure we send it out. So the first question, I think we saw, um, let me see. Do we have a question? Has anybody got a hand up? I don't think we actually have any question. We had a lot of comments. If you have a question, raise your hand. Where you would go to the more or the, I don't know, what is that? The little more dots at the bottom, and you will see where it says raise your hand. Or you can raise your hand on the screen. If you're on
Well,
camera.
well,
Like
I
old
just
school,
wanted
like me and
to
Pete, old school.
I just wanted to point out, and I think Joey from Probation Information Network, I think is the one that pointed this out. It's not really a question, but a lot of the comments today in my presentation relate to Georgia state law, and that the feds also have these types of laws, and those laws are different than the state laws. Typically, if you are convicted of a federal offense, you have to register in the state in which you live. But the laws and some of the requirements are different for federally based offenses as opposed to state-based offenses. And the Probation Information Network has a lot of information on federally based offenses. So we have anybody that's on here who has a federal offense as opposed to a state offense. That's a good resource.
Okay, and Doug actually dropped a really interesting tidbit. It said fees and other expenses are also different if you were charged and litigated under the federal or state system. Georgia PFRs must pay for polygraph, therapy, probation supervision. Federal does not require the PFR to pay those fees. And he's in DeKalb County. That's awful. Okay. So I don't think we actually have any questions. So if we don't have any questions, we'd like to thank you all. So you know what that means? It was a really good webinar. That means we gave you all the answers you needed. So people say, oh, they feel bad because there are no questions. That makes me feel good because that means apparently you got everything that you needed.
There's a
So yeah,
question.
we uh-huh.
There's a question out there now.
Okay.
What if you
Candace,
can't afford all the fees?
there are some, it's, I mean, there are some scholarship opportunities. There are some fee waivers. Sometimes it's situational dependent. Um, I don't think, have we ever seen someone violate for not paying fees? I don't think, I can't say that I
I
have.
have not heard of that.
Yeah.
I have not
Like,
heard of anybody being violated, but that
You are legit indigent.
harassed.
They are not going to lock you up for being legit. If you're sitting on mountains and mountains of cash, you're going to have a lot of problems. But if you are like living in a cardboard box, they are not going to lock you up
I
for not
agree.
paying fees, including polygraphs. They'll either waive it or they will kick it down the road or they'll
Suspend it. Yeah.
cover it, whatever. They're
Yeah.
not going to
Yeah.
kick you. They're not going to lock you up if you're
Now I
good.
I
know with
think
regular probation, you can request that your supervisor. I know with regular probation, you pay like $35 or $50 a month. You can say, "Hey, I'm unemployed, I'm indigent," and you can request to have your
Yeah.
supervisory fees waived. And I think what Joey said is which what I knew of. You can let them know and be declared indigent that you just don't have it. I have heard of people being locked up because they couldn't pay fines and their probation supervision fees, but I heard that they're not even supposed to be doing that if you have not actually committed a new crime.
yeah, but if you have money, I think the guy who started Comic-Con, they got him because he was sitting on a ton of money and he didn't pay his fees. If I may have that wrong, but
Okay.
seem to
There's a lot
recall
more
something
there,
to
but
that
yeah,
effect.
that is part of it.
I
There was a lot
can't
more to his story, but yes, that's
I
they
can't
did violate
say
him.
I can say that I was at Department of Community Supervision one time, getting a travel pass, and someone that was just on regular probation was also requesting a travel pass, and their officer said, "Have you paid your fees? You were behind a couple months." And the person said no. And their officer said, "Okay, well, when you catch up on your fees, then I will sign your travel pass."
There was probably more to that that we don't know, but yeah, I mean, like if you can afford to travel, or it depends on like a situation. Like say if it's an emergency, then I think they would probably waive it. But if you can afford to go on a vacation, you should be able to, or a trip somewhere, you should be able to afford your fees.
Yeah, but that
So
was
like,
just one thing they
yeah,
were saying, like, well, I'm not gonna let you leave the state if you're not caught up on your stuff. So,
Okay. Well, thank you
uh,
all so much. I don't think we have any other questions. Is there any other questions? Going once, going twice? No. Okay. Well, thank you all so very much for joining us again. We will be sending you everything that's been dropped in the chat along with Pete's presentation. As a matter of fact, I work extra hard because I like Restore Georgia like that, and see what I can do to help out to make sure we can get you all this information. Everybody who registered will get the information. And as far as this recording, that goes to JRP, the Justice Reform Partnership, and hopefully within the next week or so, it will be up on their website. But whenever it is, we will definitely make sure we send it out to you all. If you would like to be on Restore Georgia's newsletter, please, Laura, if you can drop the email, just email us saying that you'd like to be added to our newsletters, to be updated on anything. And hopefully we can see you on Fearless Calls if you are a PFR or a family of a loved one. And we'd be glad if you're an employer on this call or a housing provider on this call. Please email us to let us know if you have opportunities for those that we serve. Also, we keep a running list on our website at New Life Second Chance, not just for people who are PFRs, but just anybody who's impacted by a criminal record, as we serve as a resource sharing hub, as well as PEN. And PEN's information is on there as well. And all this information will go out to you all tomorrow. We thank you so very much. When that information comes for next month, Talk Justice Tuesday, which is the second Tuesday in August, please be sure to sign up for that as well. You all have a great night. Be safe, be humble, and be kind to folks. You all have a great night. Thank you so very much.